Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
We are here again on Be Honest with Dr. Yana. I'm your host, Dr. Yana, and today we have again the fantastic guest, Victor Morgado. He appeared on our show few shows back, and he told us his incredible story of the personal relationship with a psychopath. Well, today he's back, and welcome, Victor.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
So good that you're back. Well, with a continuation of your story, because what you have to say today is not that many people want to share or experience that for that regard. I know that you had a very interesting experience that, in fact, was a warning sign not to even get into the relationship with a person.
Mhm.
But you saw that and you disregarded that, like many of us, because what happens is that we want to believe in goodness of people. We want to believe that everything is going to be fine. Nevertheless, we have the internal language, the internal voice that is warning us of the either impending doom or some
Mhm.
problems that are going to occur on our way.
Yes.
So, Victor, you went through that horrendous experience in which you lost yourself, lost your family, and you had to regain yourself back. And it was a very rocky experience because getting out of relationship like that is never smooth. So, in the beginning, before or right probably at the time when you met your ex-wife, you had a dream. Could you tell us some about it?
Yes. I had a dream, but I did not recognize the dream until about a year later. The dream was that I was in a circle of a storyteller somewhere in Africa, and the storyteller was telling the story of a pilgrim to Santiago de Compostela, it's the medieval pilgrimage in Spain, who was eaten by a wildcat in the mountains of somewhere in Castilla in Spain. And I was very surprised when I heard the story. I was just like a listener, passerby, listening to the story. So when I said Compostela, that's like a spiritual experience. So I interrupted the talking and I said to the woman, to the storyteller, that why did he get eaten by a wildcat? It was actually the story was the wildcat. The wildcat ate the son of a Puerto Rican woman. Now I'm from Puerto Rico, so for me it was talking about me. So when I asked why did it happen if it was so spiritual and he was on a pilgrimage, um, the woman asked why not, and then I said because things, Jesus was walking over waters and there is powers that you can use to defy this negativity. And then the woman died when I said this. So I found the dream interesting. So I wrote it on my dream journal and I forgot about it for 365 days, actually. And I had a situation with someone during that time that inspired me to go on the trip to forget this person. It was a person that I wanted to get out of my mind.
But
And
why? Why did you want to have her out of your mind?
repeat that.
Why did you want to get her out of your mind?
It was very troublesome. I was having a lot of conflict. This was my first relationship that I had in New York since I came from France. When I was in France, I came to New York in 92. And I figured I was like attached to this person and it wasn't working. So I
Oh,
figured
so it was a different person.
a different
Oh, it's a
person,
different.
a
Okay,
different
okay.
person. So I said to myself, I need to refresh my mind, my whole, you know, setup. Since I had done the trip priorly in 1991, I figured this is what I need. I need a trip like this, And then I went on the trip. So I had a lot of tests during that trip, like I had tendonitis, I couldn't walk, I had the other one, I had problems with my feet, but I kept walking. And finally, I was guided through the right people to help me, with the healing, like, alternative healing, massage and stuff like that. And one of the guys said to me, as soon as you see a river, go into the river, walk into it until your knees, let the cold water touch your legs, and then come out of the river and put your legs against a tree. This is what he told me. So as soon as I saw a river, I did just that. And as I was resting with my feet against the tree, I see this woman coming, and it was like a very attractive young woman. And I saw her, and the first thing that crossed my mind is like, I'm going to have children with this woman. That's what went through my mind. And I met her a couple of hours later in the shelter, and it wasn't me who approached her; it was her who approached me. And we connected right there. So we kept walking for a few days, and then one day we slept together. And after that, I was like engaged, I was like in this experience with her. I kept walking 9 more days with her through the mountains until we got to the spot where we were going. And we exchanged telephone numbers, addresses, and she was from Belgium. I was living in New York. And then I came back to New York, and she sent me a postcard with a wildcat, just like the dream said, a wildcat ate this person. And the message was in Spanish that said, I'm ready to eat you. So I dismissed the dream. I don't know. It was too hard for me to believe it because it was a beautiful, intimate experience with this woman,
But did you remember the dream that you had?
Not during the trip.
You forgot about it.
I forgot about it for all for all that time. What was curious was that I received a phone call from friends, and while I was talking on the phone, they were very spiritual friends, and we were talking about. I was describing what I wanted to do in life, and what they were doing, and as I was talking to them, I was like kind of looking through my notes that I had in a notebook, and that's when I saw the dream. And I connected the whole thing. And I noticed that it was 365 days from the moment that I had the dream to the moment that I departed for Spain on this trip,
365 or 265?
365.
So it was essentially the whole year.
A whole year after, yeah.
But even after you made a connection, you did not want to believe what was in a dream, and you essentially disregarded that as just a dream because you wanted to make it happen.
That is exactly true. Yeah, that's what happened. And I reflected a lot about that, and I realized that it was really let me see how to put it. It was a hedonistic state of mind. That's what it was. It was I mean, I lived through this late 60s, early 70s. I had this state of mind of like exploring people, being with friends, and I still hadn't matured from that at that age. So I figured this is it. I found, but everything was decided by the experience, by the physical pleasure, without really thinking, do we connect? Is this where I'm heading? I mean, the whole pilgrimage was spiritual, but it was not, I wasn't really connected to wisdom. That's what I'm saying. I wasn't really connected to wisdom. And I made a choice, and I paid it very, very dearly, because it lasted like about 15 years, this choice, And of course, I was also engaged in the Catholic lifestyle, in the doctrine. And once you get seriously into it and you have a family, this and that, it forbids you from getting divorced, from separating, everything. You can't do these things. You have to work and you depend on the doctrine of salvation, you know, and that's what I was at. And I figured that that was a good thing, and that's what I needed to do, because prior to that, I was very dispersed and free spirit, and I didn't want this. If I wanted to have a family and I had children, I had to really get something together. And the most together that I saw was what I found in my conversion while I was in France. So I figured, you know, like, okay, so the Catholic faith is leading me with wisdom. So I'm going to, otherwise I wouldn't have had a family. That's the way I feel it. You know, the step that I took at that moment, it was like a very destined state for me.
But the interesting moment about it is that you went there being troubled. You wanted to heal from the previous relationship. And before you were able to do that, you immerse yourself immediately into another relationship.
Yes. This
So,
is,
what do you think about that? Can we
well,
actually?
now, then I didn't think anything about it. But now, years later, almost 30 years later, what I think is like, in the study of Kabbalah, you know, you learn that you have a tikkun to work, you know, and the tikkun is usually through the family life. That in essence, it begins through with the family life, with the decisions. And I also realized that it's very difficult to explain this from the mystical point of view, because it's very obscure to people, you know. But a lot for me has to do with reincarnation. It has to do with a previous tikkun that I lived. I put all the points together, and it had to do with experiences that I had lived prior to coming to this world. And and I had some trauma that I had to get over it, and I couldn't do it. And my road was to deal with this and accomplish, to get rid of this, to this problem of this circle and karma. Particularly, another interesting thing is that I I I when I got together with her, I realized that there was the same syndrome, like relationships that I had in the past, like we're talking about 1972, 1973. And those relationships were um, like a synchronicity. It's like, for example, I married her for giving her the papers when she came to New York. You see, because of course she was with me, I have to give her papers, I have to give her some sort of security. So those were the steps that I was taking. But I was priorly married in New York back in 1981, and it was the same story. It was a French woman, and this is how I ended up living in France. So somehow I knew that there was a circle with this, like a period repeating itself, you know. But by the time I was taking this decision, I didn't have the courage to step back or to say no, I won't do this. I I chose to go in denial and go ahead with the whole trip. And this is how I enter into this, you know.
the
Now,
idea the idea of tikkun that you mentioned from the Kabbalistic tradition, that is also the light that we bear inside of us, and also the original light that we have to manifest in this
yes,
world through our actions, through our soul, of course, through our connections. And
yes,
a lot of the times, that light gets really dimmed. And most of the time, we are the ones that are dimming that light. And if we just look at that from the perspective that we could have avoided that, right?
yes,
We have then the philosophical question here that you knew at the beginning, at the very moment when you met your ex-wife, you said to yourself that you are going to have children with her.
yes,
And those children that you have, they had to be born, and they had to be born in the union of yours, you and your ex-wife.
Yes.
Otherwise, it would have been different children if you had children with a different woman. So somehow intuitively, you already knew that you were going to marry her. And even if you had that dream of that devouring experience that you will have in your life, regardless of that, you still went with it. So I would like really to warn people, our viewers that and listeners, that if we beat ourselves up for something that happened in the past, there's always a reason behind it. And of course, we want to get out of that vicious circle. Like you said, you were on that vicious circle again and again with same type of relationship. We do want to get out of it, but up until the time we went through some of them, we won't be able to make the step outside of that circle. We must be able
Mm.
to understand that there is that circle. So you went ahead knowing that it may not be a good relationship, but nevertheless, you chose to stay.
That is true. Yes.
Being a very intuitive person, also an artist, you are very much in touch with your higher self, with you, with your own soul, and you can listen. So, what would you say that that experience, how did it affect you? How did you come out of it? And
Well,
what's about your light?
it was a process of losing myself, losing the self, and it happens little by little. Because once you go in denial, there were many other experiences that, like choices that I made prior to that moment, that were getting to that moment. For example, um, 1982, 83, you know, I was really on top of the world, like I had a job, permanent job. I had a lot of money. I had an apartment. I was young. I was 27, and there was the explosion of the art scene in New York, and I began to paint. I actually began as an art dealer, and then I said, "Hey, I can do this." So I started painting. Everything was fine, and by some reason, I I was reading a lot Henry Miller in those days, and I began to see how strong and rebellious he was towards the system. And I figured, I felt like, oh man, like why am I in this job? I used to work for the court system, and I had an office, and it was really nice. And I figured, well, I felt like it was a very mediocre thing, and I needed to move on and meet my destiny, and I had to go in live in the United States, for example. So around that time, I went to this jazz club, and I met a French woman, and we really connected. She was very important in my life because she kind of connected. She was another world. This one was another world, and she came from the '60s in France. She knew about politics. She knew about many things. So I took my decision right there, and I said, you know what? I'm quitting my job, and I'm going to France with this woman, and we had a beautiful relationship, and we went to Paris, and I met her family, and I lived there, and I spent like about 10 years. So when I came back to New York with about $1,500 in my pocket, that's it, I realized that I had it so good in New York that I had a part of me that got lost in that transfer. It was wonderful, the experience of adopting the French culture and learning and exploring and doing all this beautiful and learning French in 3 months and all of that thing. But there was something in me that got lost. It was something that has to do with the person that grew in a certain, because I had to really cross a lot of boundaries to get to the point that I was in 1983. We're going back to 1970. When I came here, I didn't speak English when I came to New York, and then I had to like really find myself. So all the all the winning and the conquest that I enjoyed from 1970 through 1983 kind of went on suspension or disappeared when I found myself in France, not speaking French, just like I found myself here not speaking English when I came, you know. So I had to restart a new life. In that process of restarting life, you think you enjoy the moment, but you lose something. There is something profoundly that you lose. So in meeting this person, there was a when I came back to New York in the early 90s, I was trying to recapture that person that I lost prior to my trip to France. And by being in that state of recapturing, I was returning to the time, to the frame of mind that I had back in the days when I was in New York. And that was the hedonistic state. That was the time that I was erasing a lot of the good experiences that I had in France by returning, because it was like a new birth again, coming back to New York, you know? It was reconnecting, but the person that I was in contact with when I came back was the old person, not the one that had been through France. Plus, that French experience didn't really work for me in New York because the people didn't have it, and I was sharing a different type of experience. So I end up luckily going back to the same job I had quit, you know, before I went to France. And I did that job for 30 years. So during that period is that I was going through all these changes. Then I took that trip to Spain and I met her, brought her back, and I continued working, trying to get married, support the family. So
So not only that you were trying to heal from a previous relationship, you were also on a personal quest to find yourself.
can you repeat that again?
You were also on the personal quest to find yourself. Not
Yes.
only that you were healing from the previous relationship, that personal quest, that light that was guiding you, took you to Spain, of course, even brought you together with that woman in order to teach you something.
It is true, and that is proof that there was some due to pay, some dues to pay in life. You know, that's how I see it. I had to meet that woman because there were like unresolved situations in me prior to her that needed to come to terms. You know, and I had to pay dues. You know, this is how I feel it. You know, and I pay them when I began this painful process, you know, with the children, which I love my children profoundly, and finding myself in a situation that wasn't real. That is the thing. I found myself in a situation that wasn't real, and that something inside of me was not the real life. And during those years, I mean, I struggled to come back. I mean, you know, as I could, you know what I mean? Because I still had to work and take care of my children, come back home and all of that. But I got involved with music and I got involved with different things that kind of helped me to travel. But I still had not go through the exorcism or something from way back in the 70s, you know? And it was like going through fire. It was like purifying myself through fire. That's how I see it. I went through hell. And and I remember one of the paintings that I did in my first solo exhibition in France. It was A Season in Hell, which was the title of a poetry book by Arthur Rimbaud. And he was really an inspiration to me, you know. And when I went through this, I said, well, I'm going through my season in hell right now with this, you know. And it got me closer to the spirituality that I had lost, to the past, the spiritual past that I had had when I was 13, 14 years. That's where I returned after this experience. That's what I'm trying to say. I actually returned to myself. I returned to the person that I was when I was much younger than 20, and that spiritual sense, you know. And I want to keep it like that. And I'm trying to keep it like that as much as possible, like trying to discern as much as possible.
Well, you have approached this consciously. We as humans, of course, we don't like discomfort. We don't like pain. We're the creatures of comfort as human beings.
Yes.
But many of us, when we find ourselves in this horrendous situation, in this abusive relationships where we suffer so much, we, of course, blame another person. We blame the destiny. We blame everything else. Like, how in the world did I get into this situation? And also, we blame ourselves and trying to avoid the suffering that we're going through.
Hmm.
Nevertheless, that suffering is what is bringing us closer to ourselves.
Exactly.
That is an experience, it's a learning experience. Even if many can say, no, I don't want that experience. Of course, we don't want that experience, but we need
Hmm.
it in order to get in touch with our own selves.
Yes.
It's difficult. It's a very difficult concept for people to understand. It
Yes.
was difficult also for me a
You
long
know,
time ago.
okay. Like this morning, it says, it's a coincidence. I was reading this. It was by Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, that said that we go through these pains exactly to be closer to God, to be closer to the self. So I mean, it's through the self that we are God, we are closer to Him, and that's if we lose something, we have to go through this fire in order to return to where we are supposed to be. And I was reading this morning around 10 in the morning, and now we're talking about it, and I see it like that.
It is synchronicity. And of course, the meaningful coincidences that we have, if we speak from the Jungian perspective, those coincidences, they do have a meaning for the particular moment, for the particular, for our lives that we have, for the connection, for the conversations, to understand also something about ourselves and the environment that we're in. So it is just emphasizing that suffering should not be avoided. Before I heard it a long time ago when I was very young, I heard that, oh, we must stay in that suffering because that suffering can teach us something about ourselves. And I was like,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? Suffering? Who wants to go through suffering? I want to avoid it as much as possible. And I tried, and I tried hard to avoid that heartbreak because I knew what it was. But nevertheless, by running away from ourselves, and it's not running away from other people, it's running away from ourselves
Ourselves.
and not going through that painful experience that we need to get to the bottom of that barrel. We need to fall face flat in
Exactly.
order not to see. uh, we have to reach the end of the rope in order to understand something about ourselves, that what we have been doing is in fact wrong.
Yes.
And then when we see it, we understand that we cannot live like this. We have to change something into our lives. And this tremendous suffering and anxiety, it shows us that we are on the wrong path, because our soul always talks to us. We must listen to our own heart. And a lot of the times we're not connected to our intuition at all. And in our Western society, we do talk about intuition, but it is something out of pseudoscience. We prefer not to listen to it. We prefer rational thinking. Nevertheless, all of us have experienced these moments of synchronicity,
Yes.
moments of the insight. All of a sudden we get the realization about something. So when we get this anxiety and when we get into this tremendous suffering, sometimes it is something that we need to go through. because when people come to see me and they ask me, oh, please help me with this anxiety, this terrible anxiety that I have, it's just unbearable. First of all, I don't tell them, I don't suggest that they need to immediately start taking medication for it because anxiety can be crippling. But that anxiety can show us something about ourselves and our lives that we are
Yes.
missing otherwise. So if you are anxious about something, try to understand what is wrong with your life. What was wrong before? What's wrong now? And what's wrong about the way, the place that you're going to?
Yeah.
Perhaps that needs to be revised, and you
Mhm.
need to understand whether you are on the right path. And this is what happened to you. And by trying to avoid that suffering, of course, you went from one relationship to another, and finally you ended up in a relationship that took your soul away.
Mhm. You know, when you go through this thing, when you go through the anxiety and the fears, is the lower denominator is the feeling of death. You know, people are afraid of death. And to become someone else, you have to die to your past. And that is, in a way, a sense of death, and you feel it. And you don't want to have that. So by not wanting to have it, you become afraid. And then it becomes like a domino effect, you know. But it is understanding the whole mechanism, the spiritual mechanisms of these things, you know. And what really helped me was exploring Jewish thought, Judaism. I really through Kabbalah, I understood so much about the whole structure of how we think, why it is that we have fear, what is fear, you know, and stuff like that. And by understanding those things, you could see the symptom in you when it comes, and you can already measure it like a you know, like a thermostat. You can see that you're not in the right place and you have to reconnect. And how spiritually, how you reconnect, it's going back to the source, you know, is what they call teshuvah. You know, you do your teshuvah, you return to yourself, you know. So I follow the advice of a Rabbi Shalom Arush, you know. And in 1915, this is when I discovered Judaism in the middle of hell. I mean, my mother had cancer. My daughter had tried to commit suicide, and she was with my ex-wife, and I had no way to prove that my ex-wife was a narcissist. I didn't even know the word narcissism at the time, you know. So I was in such hell that I didn't want to go back to work, and I didn't for about 4 months. I took a leave, you know, without pay, stay in the house, and it was crazy. But during that time, I did a lot of search, you know, online and whatever, and this is how I found um, Rabbi Shalom Arush, and I found it very interesting what they were saying, you know. And he simply suggests for someone who's not, you know, who's not part of the Jewish community or whatever, he says you simply spend 1 hour a day, 1 hour, 60 minutes, not less than 60 minutes, 15 minutes thanking God for everything you have, for everything that has happened to you, including your pain. You have to thank it because the pain was there for your own good. Then after those 15 minutes, you dedicate 15 minutes to do teshuvah and do a reflection about your life. What is that you went through? What have you done? What do you sincerely feel that could have been changed, you know? And then after that, you got 30 minutes, and that's to create your own reality. In those 30 minutes, you can speak your dreams, your frustrations, what you need to do, ask for guidance. And if you do this an hour every day, you eliminate a lot of karma. You know, you eliminate, you kind of reduce the decree of the sentence, and you are able to manage. This is how I saw it, because I saw the miracles in the beginning, and then as I kept going through, I began to see more and more. This is it. This is to follow that. I have to follow this way. And of course, you lose it sometimes. You lose your past, but you have to return. It's like Rabbi Shalom says. What happened happened. The important thing is to start all over again, you know. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslev says, whatever you break could be repaired, you know. So with that in mind, you can lose hope. You have to continue with this thing, and understanding the whole um, structure of self from that mystical perspective, which is very original. It's not like the other systems that they tell you stuff. You know, this thing is like you read through reading and meditation. You know, and once you go through that, you know, you find your way, and that's it. You have to keep, you know, loyal to yourself at that point. You know, in order to find the to continue to find that light. Particularly for me, I'm 70, you know, so I'm right past at the half of my life. So I feel I'm very aware of the years that I have left, you know, and it becomes a concern for me. I mean, I have to really make it. I have to really um, be aware. One of the things to be aware is the potential that we have inside of us, and to manifest those potential in the purpose that has to do with the greater self, with the greatest consciousness connected to the self. What service are we giving to people? Do things. For example, this week I said, okay, it's time. I was looking at the newspaper and I saw they're looking for tutors in Spanish, in English for non-speaking, you know, English is second language. So I figured, you know what, it's good to register to become a volunteer teacher for these people. And in the same way, people have different things to offer to people. And by doing these things, one kind of advance in the clarity of the mind and can see in a better perspective what happened before, you know?
And that is also
Um,
reducing your karma as well. Like you
yes,
said, that negative consequences and that drama, that complete energetic upheaval in your life, it is also reduced by thanking, of course, the source, thanking yourself, thanking other people, thanking God, and also doing all of these good things for people, serving the humanity, right? That can negate a lot of that bad karma. And you keep talking about the light, to find that light, to be guided by that light, to even see the light. But you can't see the light when you are standing in the light. You can see the light only in darkness.
in the darkness, yes.
There were no people who ever came to the understanding of this profound truth
Yeah,
by standing in the light, by being born in the light and just staying with the light their entire life. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine that we don't find light until we go through all of the darkness that our life
of course, yes.
has. And then there's not one single person of whom we know now from history or now that have made themselves, that have published books. And those books are profound books, books from which you can learn, not the ones from the yellow press. I'm talking about philosophical books.
Yeah,
Nobody gets to the understanding of those truths without having pain in their lives.
of course, yeah. Yeah, you know how it is that um, how I learned it through Jewish mysticism is that God is infinite and you cannot really reach him, you know, but we have the responsibility to try to approach him as much as better. So he has to withdraw because the light is so powerful that if the light appears, everybody will die. So just for the love of humanity, he has to hide and remain at a certain distance and work through his workers, through the angels and whatever, but he's present. But he's invisible and we don't see him. And we feel tempted to disbelief and to say, well, nothing happened, he's not there. We go into the rational state of mind. But one have to understand that he disappeared for a reason. He's like hiding for a reason. And the reason is because we cannot really handle that much light because we are finite beings. We are not really infinite beings. We have limitations in our perception. So we have to remain on that. That takes a degree of humility to start realizing that we have
Humility,
limitation.
humility, exactly,
Yeah.
understanding of our limitations, and also remaining in the thankful mode,
Hmm.
in the mode, like you mentioned, that to stay with yourself, to pray, to understand what is happening. And once you're in that mode, like you mentioned, then a lot of that bad energetic upheaval comes down in your life.
Of course, yes.
So how did that work for you? Did you see that? Because many people don't see that and they don't notice. They are in the middle of their own problems, trying to struggle their way out. So how did you, in fact, how can you describe that moment, that when you started looking into yourself and praying and being in a thankful mode, and actually trying to serve the humanity, people around you, and not just be concerned about your own problems? So how did you come to the understanding that things started to calm down in your life, that you were able to see that guiding light and to finally come out of that situation?
Well, there is a moment of when you have to when faith kicks in, and the whole concept of emuna, that I learned from Rabbi Shalom Arush, from his book, The Garden of Emuna. Um, it's a whole process of understanding that everything is for the good. And you have to, that's how I took it from that point. Everything is for the good. And by developing that emuna little by little and seeing signs that things were working out according to my faith, um, I began to see, it's a matter of gaining also like self assurance, believing in oneself, believing, which is Rabbi Nachman of Breslev always says, you have to believe in yourself. You have to have belief in yourself, and this belief in yourself makes you understand that when you have the faith, when you have it, and how to remain in that faith. So once you have that, things become clearer. It's almost like it's seamless, it's like you know I let's say that at the biggest moment for me, the biggest sign for me was like when my daughter came back to my life, because she was estranged from me. I mean, I didn't see her, and she was with the mother all this time, and she was very troubled. This is after she tried to commit suicide and all of that, and she was only 17 when they found her living by herself, and the authorities brought her to me because the mother was not around, and nothing happened. Nobody inquired about where was the mother because the father was there, and I was only 3 blocks away. So she came to my life, and it was another test, which I that was a fantastic metaphysical experience for me spiritually, because it happened after I visited a synagogue for the first time for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. A friend brought me to the synagogue, and I experienced these things. And after I experienced these things, a few weeks later, I get this phone call from the authorities. We found your daughter. She's going back home, this kind of thing. And I was like in shock. So once she came to the house, she was another person. I had to deal with another person. She was an exotic dancer. She was working somewhere, and she was still going to school, to high school, and I had no control over this. But the law is telling me you have to have control because you're the father, But how can I have control over a person that I I had no control over? She was a stranger, So I listened to a lecture by Rabbi Shalom Arush, and he says, in a problem like this, you have to do a 6 hours prayer. People usually in Israel, they will go to the forest for 6 hours, isolate themselves, I couldn't do that. And I was at home. So what I did is that twice I woke up at 2 in the morning and I prayed through 8 in the morning, from 2 in the morning to 8 in the morning, nonstop, 2 Saturdays, because I had to go to work during the week. So I did it Friday to Saturday, and the next week, Friday to Saturday. And surely I saw the miracles. She stopped dancing. She stopped going out. She started staying home. And it was so obvious that it was a miracle. I couldn't say it wasn't a miracle. And she, we began to speak to each other, and like I had to express my feelings to her, how it was difficult for me to, as a father, and she was from her 17-year-old perspective telling me, you don't understand this and that, because she had experienced rape and stuff like that. And she tried to explain me these things. So at the end, I said to her, I don't pretend to understand everything you say, but one thing is
Mhm.
clear is that you do not understand me either, you know? And I made it clear. And when I said that, there was a tremendous silence. There was a healing silence between us. And and things got better. Or on the financial side, it got really better. She was like a blessing, because the law stopped, the court stopped my alimony and the child support and everything. And suddenly I was getting a full paycheck, and it was so much money that I didn't realize I earned this much money. So that changed my life tremendously, financially, because I could do things, I could fix the house, do different things. And my life was doing well, but it was through this pain too, because to do 2 sessions of 6 hours of prayer, man, you have to really be in pain, and afraid. It was a lot of fear what I felt, because I felt like they, launched me from an airplane with a parachute in the middle of a jungle somewhere, and I had to figure things out, and it wasn't home. This is how I
And
felt.
plus, parachute is not opening up. That's how we feel when we go
Yes,
through it. Yeah.
yes. And I'm glad, the next thing that I had to go through was not to worry about her, and to think of me, how did I behave at that age? And I remember when I left home, I was the age of my son. I was 25, but I did not look back after that. I wanted to find myself on my own, and I was cold in the sense that I was not really mature enough to realize the pain that the people behind me were feeling because of my absence. And there were times that I didn't call home for years, because I felt independent, I felt free. And I'm going through this with her. I don't hear from her for long periods of time, and then she sent me a text telling me, "Hi, Dad, I love you," whatever. And
That's incredible.
yeah,
That's
and
incredible.
all I
Mhm.
see is myself. When I see her, I see myself. I said, "This is what I did." And I remember my grandmother telling me, you know, my grandmother used to tell me, um, whatever you do to your parents, it will come back to you. You will see it.
That's
And
right.
I never took that seriously, and I see it. I'm still going through it, but I'm still I hope in the one challenge. There's a challenge to this, and the challenge is not accepting it. The challenge is the control that's still within. Like, oh, it's my daughter, but now I know that she's 23. I don't have that much control over her. But the second challenge is surrendering this person into the universe, surrendering her. You know what I mean? Just like I surrender myself, surrendering her and trusting her decisions. Like, for example, with my son was another test for me, because he was very shy, introvert. And when I was 12 or 13, I wanted to have a job. I remember looking for work, because I didn't need to work, but I wanted to be independent and work. but he was more intellectual into his books and to his computer programming and this and that. And I was concerned. He doesn't have a job. I mean, he should have like a little job. And every time I will tell him, I felt like he was shy about it. I said, maybe he's insecure to look for a job. Or, I mean, I don't know. And I was in the middle of this to the point that I called a psychologist, you know? And we set an appointment. And before that appointment, I had dinner with my son, and he quietly said, I sent 30 applications for work. And I was so impressed when he told me that. And he told me 29 were denied. And then I tried to tell him, oh, but you be courageous. And he said, but the last one was approved. And I started working in 3 months. He was still in college. He wasn't graduating yet. So he had a job waiting for him, making like $30,000 more than I made in any of the years working in the court system, you know. He's a wealthy kid, you know, and my head was spinning because I didn't know in what kind of world I was, what reality I was living, because my reality was the 20th century. And now this is the kid who knew, who he trusted, you know, himself, even though he was shy and whatever, but he knew where he was going. And he found his way. And in a way, I have to say that I saw this in my ex-wife, in his mother. You know, and this one of the things that I liked of her was that she was very determined and very in her quietness, because she was very passive aggressive, you know, but she was very determined in doing things and accomplishing things. And that was an inspiration for me to see this in a person, you know. And I see it in him, but I also see in him my side. The side that I am, I see it in him. I see the Puerto Rican in him also. That's what I'm trying to say, you know. But that said, I have to let him go too, you know. Soon he will leave, and then that will leave me in the solitude of a life circle accomplished, you know. The kids are leaving, and see what's going to be the next stage now, you know. Apart,
Absolutely.
you know, I'm writing. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get it together. With this writing, it's a big challenge for me, you know.
But the most important thing, one of them that you have realized that, yes, we must to let our kids go. And Jibril Halil said long time ago, he said that the children, they come through us and not from us. So we have
Exactly.
to be able to let them go at some point of time because they have to
Exactly.
live their own lives. Um, so in regard of the children, that's something that we all must be able to understand. Otherwise, we will encounter problems. But now, since you overcame that tremendous, can't even call it a problem. We can solve the problem, right?
Definitely a trauma.
That tremendous trauma, when you overcame that, you have finally come to the understanding that it was all uh, part of the path, because it's also, like you mentioned, with the tikkun and filling the vessel with the light. When you're not ready for that, the vessel is going to break when the light gets into that vessel, according to Kabbalah. And of course, you have to be ready to contain all that light and not break. So that is why it is my understanding that you are getting more and more light, and you meeting people on your path as a divinatory experience to understand that you are where you are and where you need to go, and you're on the right path.
Amen.
You're writing uh, your memoirs, and they are incredible, even of the topic that I understand, and even small little glimpses that you told me about.
Hmm. Yeah. And there is always, once you get into it, there is always more topics on that, you know, because there's so much to say, you know, and in the narrative and the story. I'm a storyteller. That's what it is, deep inside. And that's part of my tikkun, and I have to continue doing it. And I have to cannot forget that the whole dream was connected to a storyteller. The woman in my dream, when before I met my ex-wife, was a storyteller. And the storytelling is very important because that's actually an essential lower denominator in all human beings. You have to tell your story because that's how other people connect and see, and it's actually helping people, and helping yourself by helping people, by telling your story and by making sense of the story. Telling the story help you make sense of the story, because sometimes it becomes like, did I imagine this? It's almost like one imagines what happened, or what happened in our life. But by telling the story, we control it, we capture the story, and it's a good thing.
In our lives, they are stories. And many of us, we don't want to talk about our traumatic experiences, of course.
Yes.
Or we can go and talk about it to our therapists. And therapists, of course, they get so overloaded with all these horrendous things that the people telling them that they need to have their own therapists.
Yeah, oh my God. I never thought of that.
Yes, because exactly. I had a professor, and when I was still in school, and she said, I told her, I said, well, this is so difficult. I cannot bear it anymore. I need to leave, take a sabbatical or something. And she
Oh
said,
my
no, you're
God.
going to stay where you are. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, how do you do that? And she said, well, I've been in private practice for the past 20 years. I graduated in 20 years and said, how do you do that? So she said, I've been in therapy for the past 40 years.
Oh my God.
And I thought, where am I? I need to
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
So I know that I was even speaking to a doctor of mine, and she said, well, Yana, you also need to go. You need to find a therapist. You need to go because it's really difficult to be helping people all the time. And you're helping people, you can get overloaded. And I said, I cannot talk about my own problems to anybody. And that I realize can be one of the biggest problems. Of course, we can share that with people that are close to us, our friends, our family, the therapist who doesn't have the right to reveal anything, and that's the safest way. But to me, having come through, my God, I have to use a proper grammar, through all of those traumatic experiences, made me realize that it's very difficult to trust people,
Oh
even
yeah.
if there is a non-disclosure agreement, of course, and
I still
you,
feel it. I still feel this,
yes,
I mean, I'm not very open like I used to, like back in the 70s or 80s or 90s. I'm very, I'm into doing research and doing whatever, and read a lot of study the Kabbalah, look at the videos, look at the teacher, and and when I meet people, particularly women, it's particularly if I connect, I feel like I connect to some people, I feel like I don't know, like a cat who has been beaten around for a long time and doesn't want to see another human being. It's like a reaction that I feel, is, I don't know how to explain it.
and that
But
is normal, Victor. That is absolutely normal. We cannot go in our lives walking around with the naked soul. The soul
yeah,
has to be dressed
exactly.
also, because we have to assess the situation, assess the person, and not to be gullible.
Yeah,
Uh, we have to be able to set these healthy boundaries. And even when we connect with somebody, it also does not mean that that person is the person whom you can trust.
yeah.
Because a lot of the times,
It's a
like
test. It could
it's
be a test.
it could be the test. Well, it's not like God is sitting there and just throwing tests like darts our way, right?
Of course.
Uh, but it's also people can be absolutely charming, and with your experience with a psychopath. Psychopath can be very charming, even if you get a connection. And many people connect the psychopaths because they can give to them, like chameleons, what they're looking for. And that could be problematic. And you can
Yeah,
have that great connection, but later you realize that you were devoured by a cat, by a wild cat.
sure. My God. You know, it's true what you say, but it's also having in mind the other person, like, am I going to hurt this person? I mean, because the other person can be very serious about you. And then if you realize that it's not the person and you walk away, there's a problem there. There's a tikkun there very, very heavily, I had a relationship, my first relationship when I was 17, and she was also 17, and we separated in 1979 before I took off my life like this, and then we reconnected at the time that I was really reconnecting with myself as friends. I haven't seen her personally. I only see her online since 2015 because I was afraid to cross that boundary. She lives in Canada, and I was thinking, oh my God, like I don't want to. It was very painful breakup, in between us because we were young and we grew up together practically from 17 to 27. And it was my first intimate experience, and I was her first intimate experience. We were like kids growing, and then suddenly to break up from that for me was easier, not so easy because I was in this easier in the sense that I was in the poetic mode of experiences, but she was not like that. She was more of a standard early 20th century woman from
Mhm.
Spain who found one man, and that's the man that she's going to be with. And it was dramatic for her. And we discussed this very often. Since in the last 9 years, we've been discussing this thing, trying to make sense. And lately has been very good because we have understood a lot of what happened to us in those 50 years, actually going half a century, and analyzing what happened in her life, what happened in my life. We have come to terms with a lot of things, and I wish I was connected to her to the point that I said, hey, I want to be with this person, but I'm not connected like that. I'm connected in a platonic way with her,
Mhm.
and I feel a lot of good feelings and even responsibility towards her. I feel very responsible towards her because I feel like I gear her to certain things in life, that she wasn't like, and I feel I spoiled her. I mean, I kind of tainted her or something, like, and she's the way she is. She has many children, by the way. She got married, she got divorced, she had 5 children, a whole army of grandchildren. She's doing fine with this. She's very much in love with her grandchildren. And what I feel guilty is that those kids, they want to meet me, the grandchildren. And I always felt this fear of the pain we went through separating from each other in 1978, and or to create some sort of like non-truthful image, to get into a relationship without wanting to be in a relationship, and which is one of the problems that Puerto Rican culture have, because in the Puerto Rican culture, one is raised believing that the woman has to be very virtuous, but not the man. The man should be open and should be free to do what he wants to do or need to do. And that is something very ingrained. So it's very easy to fall into the temptation of having, what I mean, like an experience that can really lead into more serious consequences, with her or anybody. And by that fear, that apprehension, I haven't been able to cross that frontier going to Canada, so I just communicate with her about life and the things we do. And I hope to get the courage to go and visit her because before she passes away, I mean, whatever, she's not doing well now with her health, and that's a concern for me. And and also the grandchildren, I saw them growing online.
Mm.
I never had the courage to go over there, and they really, as little kids, they were calling me grandpa. And
Mm.
her daughter was calling me on Father's Day, something that my daughter never did, And her first daughter, it was me who chose the name before she was born. I call her Marisol because Marisol was the name of the first Puerto Rican Miss Universe, and it was a sense of pride. So that I said, when we have a daughter, we have to name her Marisol, and that's why she named this daughter Marisol. And she's an extremely intelligent girl. She's into psychology. She's very successful in Canada, very open, and with this personality to call me. And this is very, very interesting for me to have this kind of relationship.
And that's the courage, that a lot of the times we miss that courage. We don't have it because we hide behind our own shields or the walls that we erect in front of us for various reasons.
Yeah,
When it comes to trusting, I wanted to say that we don't trust because we're so gullible. Because when we go through all of these horrendous experiences, we lose that trust. And by not trusting people, it does not make us bad people. And it also does not make us bad people by starting trusting someone, because that is a choice to trust someone. And that's where the courage comes
yeah,
comes from, to trust yourself enough to actually make that choice to be able to trust another human being. So even if we fail there and somebody is not as trustworthy as they seem at the beginning, it is okay. I realized over the years that I should not blame myself. I should not beat myself up for trusting the person and helping the person and not seeing anything back, but something bad in return. But you don't seek goodness from goodness, right? That's what how the saying goes. So we nevertheless, not being gullible people, we trust because we choose to trust.
yes. And also trusting, I also realize that trust, when you have trust, it's also an intuitive feeling. And that intuitive feeling gets sharper as you get older. And as you study, as you go deep into yourself, you get sharper with that. You can see. And and you can even dream about people or see synchronicities that make you realize things about your intuition. But it's a matter of growth. And it is all connected to self-realization, to searching yourself. And this is how trust, the feeling of trust, gets sharpened by looking deeper within yourself. That kind of feeling, because that's your connection to God, that trust. So it's almost like a little channel that becomes clearer and clearer, and you could see. And it's actually the heavenly light showing you things, the different things. And that's how I see it from studying Kabbalah. That's what I have been discovering, that things work like this. Even psychology, is heading in a situation. I have the thesis. I have 3 theses from a psychologist in Barcelona in Spain. This guy is outstanding. He has 5 or 6 PhDs, and one of them is on psychology and Judaism and Kabbalah. And he uses the tree of life to explain exactly where we are at when we are thinking and where we're going through life, and understanding that that tree of life is like a hologram inside of us, and there is wisdom and there is intelligence, and there is this connection with God, which is the first sphere, the aleph on top of us. And when we fall out of balance with ourselves, then there's a short circuit somewhere that we have to bring into balance. And this balance is the whole work of the self, of spirituality. So the way he describes in his book, he has Carl Jung in one sphere and Freud in the other. And those are the two spheres above the regular spheres that we live in, because we live in the seven spheres of like Hesed and Chokhmah, but right above is for Moses and for the higher people. And then you have the knowledge and the intelligence, which are two lowers in the triangle of the higher sphere, or the high up there, with God, you have wisdom and you have knowledge before you come into understanding. And he describes Jung in one of them, which is the intuitive side. And then Freud is on the other, which is intelligence, but it's in the sphere of Binah, but it's irrational. And if both are stuck in each, there will be no communication. There's got to be conflict among both of them. And this is what we see in the separation between Jung and Freud. This is the way he explains it. Dr. Mario Savan is his name. And I found that very interesting because by seeing these things, we could see the future of psychology, where it's heading, because it is heading. There is this guy, this historian in France, Malraux. His name is Malraux. He wrote a book on art, on the history of art, and then somewhere in the book he says the future will be spiritual or not at all. The future will be spiritual or not at all. So as we look for ourselves and we come closer to that future, we reconnect to all this truth, that because we're still in a fragmented world. So of course, you could be a psychologist, I can be doing something else, but somehow in every field that we work, there is a fragment. There's a division of two, one person and the other person. And from there's going to be somewhere some tiredness, you get exhausted at a certain point because you're in between two people. But when you come into the oneness, which is the slow process on raising up to the higher three spheres, where they Freud was when he came up with his theories, and Jung was when he intuitively came up with his theory. And from the sphere of Chokhmah, where there is Jung, you could see that it's connected to intuition, to the art, to creativity, to automatic writing, and all the spiritism, and all this kind of thing that Freud would not like. And he was on the other sphere. And it's finding the balance in between the two.
Yeah, between the Gevurah and Gabula, have to find the middle, and that's the middle that is what we should be striving for. But nevertheless, that tree of life that we have inside of us, that's the God inside of us. And of
Yes.
course, that when we fight with a certain aspect of our lives, the tree of life also has the opposite tree, of course, when it's in the opposite direction. It is called the klipot, and that's where all of our vices are, and we have to fight in every area. So we have God, and we inside of us, we have to be able to connect to ourselves in order to connect to the divine. Now, Victor, what advice would you have given yourself if you were to go back to the age when you were 17 or 18? Or to your early 20s, what advice would you have given yourself?
Okay. Advice to myself.
To yourself.
Okay. It's interesting because the connection with the self for me started very early.
You mentioned that you were 13. Mm-hmm.
13, I became an initiate to a prior state, and that prior state, I think, began at 6 years when I was living with my grandmother, and she was a pillar of the Baptist church, and she introduced me to the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. I was 6, and I had to memorize the Psalms, and she gave me candy for it every time I memorized a psalm, and understanding what prayer was. And in that process, I developed a self. There was like it was so beautiful that I was almost sure that I could heal people from a distance if I put myself into it, that I couldn't see why not, you know? This is when I was 8 years or 9 years, you know? And
But then it was different at the time that you were 18, 19, and 20. It was different, and you
it was
deviated from
different.
that.
Yes. So, but what is not different is returning to the self. And my memory of the self is that point, the point when I began to pray. And I was like 6 or 7 years, you know? I was very serious. And the concept that I had then was the concept that I developed later on. It was a concept that I forgot for decades. And then suddenly I said, hey, wait a minute, I was wiser when I was 8 or 10, you know? And then at 13 is when I really kind of woke up to a new world when I came to New York, you know, and I was in the middle of art and history and whatever, you know. And but the connection really is the self. And I don't know where is the self on each other person. That was myself, you know. That's the experience that I had. Other people don't have that experience when they're 6 or 7 like I did, you know. But the connection is really being connected with that spiritual. I don't know at what age people feel these things about spirituality, but I felt it at that age. And then when I converted to Catholicism when I was in France, I was already 33 years, but I did not convert to Catholicism because I liked the Catholic Church. I converted because I was inside of a monastery and I liked the solitude and the mysticism that reconnected me to whom I was before that, prior to that, when I was younger, you know.
So
And
would
when
you
I
say
just
that it's important to stay true to ourselves?
exactly, I think true to my own self is be close to that mystical life and follow my intuition, and of course now understanding through through Judaism that I need to have an eye on my potential. What is that I want to do? Because that's part of my job. Because once I died, I don't have an opportunity to express my potential because it will be another level of energy, you know. But while I'm alive, I have to bring that potential. So I think I brought a lot of that potential, and I still have to connect to whatever it is that I need to do. And that's what's exciting about life, you know. It was beautiful.
And to continue
And
after
to,
that horrendous experience, to go through
yes.
healing and to come to the realization of there is that so much left to do. And that is exciting. I am so glad that you shared your story, Victor, because that is very healing for people who listen to our show. Because the healing, well, what is the purpose of art? One time that I remember when I was passing the comps for the master's degree in literature, my professors asked me the question, so what is the purpose of art? I told them it was an oral exam, and I told them that the purpose of art is to be able to identify with those stories and to purify your soul, to identify, to be able to understand you're not the only one who's going through it, to get the answers that are for you, to get that healing, particular healing that is designed just for you by reading, by watching, by reading literature, by watching the pictures, even the movies, that I was able to also find healing and understanding and guidance even through certain movies. And by hearing that answer, they were so perplexed. And when I had to get outside of the door for them to discuss and tell me whether I passed comps or not, I was there like for 15 minutes, and I was so worried what is actually happening there.
Mm.
When I came in, they told me that they were debating because they did not know the answer themselves. They were debating, and they finally, between themselves, and they finally came to the conclusion that yes, it is the purpose of art, because there's so many different theories of the purpose, and we all have different understanding. That's what it was for me. So, listening to your story, people are in fact able to identify, to understand themselves better, to see that there is a way forward. Because as humans, that of course have to put ourselves for the service of humanity and other people, not just to serve our own egos, uh, that brings the enlightenment on its own. That brings the healing and solution to other people as well. And like Jung said, that our sole purpose is to kindle the light in the chaos, in the darkness of mere being. So that's what it is. Kindle the
Yeah.
light, and that tikkun, we have to be aware of that and know that there is a future, there is a presence to be learned from, past and presence, and there is a light in the future as well. So whoever's listening, and if you have lost all hope, uh, evidently you haven't, because you're listening to this program right now. So I want to let you know that there is hope. You just have to look
Okay.
inside and understand yourself. Well, thank you so much, Victor, for joining us today.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
And thank you, everyone who was listening and watching to this show. It was Be Honest with Dr. Yana. Come back next week for another interesting discussion. And meanwhile, we're wishing you a fantastic day. Stay tuned.
Amen. Thank you. Okay. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye.